So, in the recent Olympus diplomacy finals, we saw this Turkish opening: Ankara to Black Sea in an arranged bout with Sevastopol, Constantinople to Bulgaria, and the interesting move Smyrna to Ankara. And in the video itself, I basically glossed over it. I said, we've seen this enough before, we don't need to talk about it again, and I moved on. But I got a comment in the comments section of that video asking, well, why does Turkey do this? Because it doesn't make sense on the face of it, right? Why are you holding this unit in Smyrna, essentially? You're moving it into a place you know it's going to bounce back. And if you do anything else with this unit, if you move it to Constantinople, if you move it to Armenia, you're getting within range of supply centers. Why would you not want to do that? So it's kind of unintuitive, and I really should have talked about it more in that video, which is why I'm going to make this short one, just to go over it. So the reason why you would want to do Smyrna hold in this configuration is more to do with why you wouldn't want to do anything else, right? So one thing we're going to assume here is that you've got this bounce in the Black Sea locked in. Turkey has a few other options in the early game, usually to do with Ankara moving to Smyrna, to Constantinople even. But if you do that, then this move doesn't really matter as much, right? You couldn't move this to Constantinople anyway, so you don't really have the other options that we're talking about. So let's just go ahead and say you've got this bounce in Black Sea locked in. Why would you then want to move Smyrna to Ankara instead of doing one of the alternatives? Turkey only really has two alternatives to this. They have the move to Armenia to attack the Russian, or the move to Constantinople, which is kind of the more standard. This is the opening that most Turkeys will play at any level of play, right? This first one is easy to explain why you might not want to do this. Armenia is a very aggressive move. It obviously puts you next to Sevastopol. The Russian is not going to be happy about this at all. You get the shot at Sevastopol, but you've got no units to back it up. So it's angering your neighbor with no immediate payoff, right? And that's a bad idea in top level play. Usually you want to be doing moves that kind of keep your neighbors relatively on side until you can go into an attack on one of them. You can work with someone to take something, basically. This is a very committal move that doesn't really help you all that much unless you're looking to, say, show Austria that you're absolutely committed to their cause. So let's assume Armenia is out because of that. This is the main other one, and this is the one that it's not immediately obvious why you wouldn't want to do this. So moving to Constantinople has a very, very obvious upside, right? If you move to Constantinople, and we'll go ahead and submit the orders here, you have two units on the Balkans. And if you can get something like Austria supporting you into Romania, and you actually manage to get into Romania, say because Russia is bouncing you in Black Sea again, you start off as a 5-center Turkey. Now, 5-center Turkey is one of the strongest powers in the early game. They're just so well positioned to just take over the rest of the board at that point. Literally, the only downside to this is you might be so strong that your opponents all gang up on you. But putting that aside, this is an excellent start. And this isn't even the only option. You could potentially get Italy to support you into Greece, or Austria to support you into Greece. If Austria's opened with a less conventional opening, for example the Hedgehog, where they attack Venice just to make sure that Italy doesn't go into Tyrolia and Venice against them, then this is far more likely to work going into Greece. And starting on 5 supply centers, as I mentioned, absolutely excellent. This has a massive upside. So what's the downside to doing this? Well, the downside is that getting into this 5th supply center isn't actually all that likely, especially in high-level games. People recognize that a 5-center Turkey is a really strong power. And if you look at the position that people are in, Russia can easily just do this, right? And then even if you get the support from Austria into Romania, you're getting bounced out of Romania here. You're not gaining anything. Constantinople is stuck there. If you try and go for Greece, if Austria has done this to start, they can very easily just support themselves into Greece. And there's nothing you can do about that. And in fact, I'd say this is the most likely thing for Austria to do, even if you're trying to barter support into Romania. They might want to guarantee that they get Greece. And so, your chances of actually picking up that 5th supply centre, at least in a high-level game, are relatively low. And this is where the downside comes in. So, what's the problem with having moved to Constantinople here? Well, quite often in a high-level game, the alliance configuration is going to be Italy-Austria versus Russia-Turkey. This happens very, very often. If you've done something like this, for example, Italy will likely convoy Apulia over to Tunis and prepare for a Lepanto. That's the attack where they go in Eastern Mediterranean or Aegean and try and convoy an army over into your homeland. And if you've done this, what happens in the build phase? Well, now you can build Fleet Smyrna, and that's all well and good. But then if you go forward from that point, you've got one fleet here defending against 2 enemy fleets on this front. And even if Greece is, for example, focusing on Bulgaria rather than helping the Italian into Aegean or into Eastern Mediterranean, you've still got the problem of you have to guess correctly which one of these two provinces the Italian is going to go into. Italy could just build fleet here, slip around into Eastern Mediterranean while you try and cover Aegean, and then convoy over to Syria, and there's not much you can do about that. If you know this alliance configuration is going to happen, let's go ahead and roll back. There is one way you can prevent that, and that is to get this fleet here onto your front line. Because if you manage to do that, right, you can have 2 fleets out on the front line, and therefore you can block both Aegean and Eastern Mediterranean, and suddenly you're much, much safer. Obviously, it relies on an agreement with Russia to not enter Black Sea, or to not attack you if they do enter Black Sea. But if you're in a position where it's Juggernaut versus Lepanto, which is Austria-Italy versus Russia-Turkey, then you're probably relying on that anyway. And this is where the Constantinople unit is a problem, because if you're not going for Romania, if you're basically blocked in here, you can't get anywhere with this, where are you moving that Constantinople unit to? Well, you can move it to Smyrna, and that allows you to get this fleet out, but then you've covered up your build center so you can't have 2 fleets on this front anyway. What are your other options? Well, you can move it to Ankara, but then you can't get this fleet out. So you can't get a double fleet on this front. If you've moved up to Constantinople, there's no way you can prepare to defend yourself. Whereas, if we roll back to the previous season again and instead do this, and then submit our orders, now we're again saying, okay, Bulgaria's probably not going to get anywhere. Austria is going to get Serbia into Albania into Greece. You know, Italy is going to convoy their unit across, and we're going to bounce here again. Now we have, forget this. And we're going to move this fleet out into Constantinople to defend against this potential incoming AI. And if we do it that way, and that means we can tell Russia, okay, you're free to support yourself to Romania, which they hopefully will do, we can move Smyrna to Syria or to Ankara. And that's really, really important here, because if you look at the position now in the builds, you can put a fleet here. And that fleet is key. That fleet is everything. You have 2 fleets on this Italian front against 2 enemy fleets, one of which will probably be tied up trying to get Bulgaria. Suddenly you're on even footing. And this is absolutely what you need against the strong Austria-Italy alliance, because otherwise Turkey falls. That is just how it is. So that is the reason why you would want to hold Smyrna. It's not so much because, you know, there's a great advantage to the unit being in that position. It's because the unit can move out of the way from that position. Whereas if it's in Constantinople, it is stuck.